everyone, this is Karen.
Welcome everybody, I am Shane.
Today we're looking at part 1 of A Walk on the High Line.
New York City's highest park.
And the vocabulary words are transport.
Transport.
The company is responsible for the transport of building materials from one place to another.
Goods.
Goods.
The goods in this store are extremely expensive.
Oh no. Abandon.
Abandon.
Because of the typhoon, many people were forced to abandon their homes.
Exhibit.
Exhibit.
The museum has dozens of new exhibits.
Dense.
Dense.
The treasure hunters cut their way through the dense jungle. So we're talking about New York. New York, a walk on the High Line.
Yeah.
So I think a long time ago, in the 1900s, New York, it used to be like a really dangerous place.
Right, in the early 1900s, right?
That's right.
When they had to transport like goods like food and stuff through the city, there were a lot of accidents because there were like carriages, there's no cars yet, right? Carriages and people, and I guess there were a lot of accidents. So they needed to think of a way to get a train in through the city and can transport these goods safely.
That's right. So I think it was in the 1930s, that's when they built the High Line, which is the elevated railway.
So it's above everybody, so it doesn't cause any problems.
So I think that really helped, New York with their accidents. And but as trucks became more popular, I think people started abandoning the High Line.
Right. So basically they started figuring out other ways of getting goods through the city. And of course, everything expanded and modernized. So they stopped using that train line. So what do they use it for now?
But what a pity, though. So I think, back in 2009, and the New Yorkers, they're thinking, we got to turn it into something else. Maybe a nice park.
A nice park, yeah. That's a really interesting idea. Okay, let's learn more about that, and we'll learn all about this park next time.
All right, enjoy.
Enjoy.
A Walk on the High Line, New York City's highest park. The streets of New York City in the early 1900s were a dirty and dangerous place. Steam-powered trains delivered food alongside pedestrians and carriages, leading to many deadly accidents. By the 1930s, it was clear that something new had to be done. Enter the High Line. This elevated railway solved a major problem for the city. But over time, it has changed to serve the city in a much different way.
Hello, everyone. Today's lesson is called A Walk on the High Line, New York City's highest park. Part 1. Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff.
And my name is Mike.
A high park.
Well, yeah, absolutely. This is not the kind of adjective we often see when talking about a park. We might say the biggest park, or the greenest park, or the oldest park, or something like that.
Or the most beautiful park.
Or the most beautiful park. But parks are generally made of grass and trees and gardens and lakes. You know, a good park has those things. And these are things that we find on the ground. Grass, trees, gardens. We don't find them up in the air, which is where we would find something we describe as being high. So this is a park that is above the ground. It is up in the air. It is over your head. This is kind of an unusual park, I would say.
Anyways, it's located in New York City.
A city with great parks.
With great parks like Central Park, but we won't be talking about that today. Anyways, let's talk about New York City a little bit. The streets of New York City in the early 1900s were a dirty and dangerous place. Oh boy, were they ever. Get this. Steam-powered trains delivered food alongside pedestrians and carriages, leading to many deadly accidents. So we're not talking, here's a nice street and a curbing and some sidewalks. People were walking and people were driving in cars and they were separated. Everybody was safe and nobody was dying. No, no, no. We had people and trains and carriages, and there were no markings on the roads. It was a mess, a deadly mess.
That's right, deadly and dirty because, of course, alongside those steam-powered trains with their smoke and steam, you'd have horses and carriages with all the horse poop on the ground. It was not the place you wanted to be walking around in your brand new shoes, that's for sure. So, by the 1930s, we read it was clear that something new had to be done. So cars came in, but the trains were still there. The roads were not well organized. Accidents happened. People got hurt and killed. So by the 1930s, a few years later, it was clear that something new had to be done. This is something that everyone looked around and said, this is crazy. We have to do something to fix these deadly, dirty streets in New York. Yeah. So what did they decide to do?
What did they decide to do? That's what we're going to find out next. Let's go ahead and move on. Enter the High Line.
The High Line?
High Line. Yes, this elevated railway solved a major problem for the city, but over time it has changed to serve the city in a much different way. So before, you had the train at the same level as pedestrians.
On the ground.
On the ground there. Big mistake. Oh, people were dying left and right. That's where the High Line comes in. You take that train there and you elevate it.
Oh, this is like
you make it higher.
Like the Brown Line of the MRT in Taipei that goes down Fuxing Road, right? It's a train that runs above the city level, the street level, so the train stays out of people's way. That's why we call it an elevated railway. That is something that is higher. Well, we'll find out more about the High Line and its new form, its new life in the city of New York after this break.
Hello， 大家好，我是 Hanny。我们这2天的课文要介绍的是纽约市一个很特别的公园，它不是在地上哦，而是在空中，它叫做 High Line。有人把它称为高架铁道公园，或者是空中铁道公园。那我们来看看这座公园的由来。在1900年代初期，纽约市的街道又脏又危险，蒸汽火车就会在行人跟马车旁边在那边运送食物，然后造成了许多致命的交通事故。好，到了30年代，高架铁道的出现就为城市解决了这个大问题。我们先来看文中补充单字 pedestrian。pedestrian 表示行人，那么 deadly 它是形容致命的，还有 elevated 它是形容高架的或是升高的。补充一下，它的名词是 elevation 只是表达提高、升高，这个字也可以表达高地、高处或是海拔的意思。我们接着回到课文中。
A walk on the High Line, New York City's highest park. Cutting through New York's downtown area, the High Line allowed for the transport of goods to where they were needed. As trucks became more popular for making deliveries, the High Line was slowly abandoned. Nature took its course, and while some sections of track were torn down, others gradually became home to a wide variety of plants and animals. By 2009, New Yorkers had realized the value of this unique area, and the High Line's new life as a public park began.
Okay, cutting through New York's downtown area, the High Line allowed for the transport of goods to where they were needed. So the trains weren't running along the ground there, knocking pedestrians to the left and right and killing people and stuff like that. No. This was now an elevated train, and it was high off the ground. It was now a High Line. Yes, this elevation allowed for the transport or movement of goods to where they were needed. And here, yes, we do have the word transport. It's a noun. Transport is movement. You might have heard the word transportation, transportation is the movement of one thing, or some things, I should say, from one place to another. Transport is just movement. For example, the company is responsible for the transport of building materials from one place to another. They move building materials from one place to another. And here we're talking about the transport or the transportation of goods.
That's right. Goods are things that are sold, basically. Of course, things that are made in a factory, from pens and pencils to shoes, televisions, and cars. These are goods. They make them in the factory and then they sell them in stores of all sorts of types. But also we might talk about things that come out of a farm. Apples or grain or rice or things like that. Those could be goods as well. So it could be things that you find in your local store, or things that big companies will buy in large amounts, like some company buys millions of potatoes to make French fries out of, or something like that. But these are just things that are sold in small sizes and large sizes all over the place. For example, the goods in this store are extremely expensive. Maybe it's a jewelry store selling goods made of gold and silver and stuff like that. All right, let's get back to our look at the High Line. So originally, of course, it was for the transport of goods. It says as trucks became more popular for making deliveries, the High Line was slowly abandoned. So as cars developed and small cars became bigger trucks, trucks became more useful than trains. They can take large amounts in the big truck, but they can take it down streets. They can bring it right to your door. So moving things in huge amounts, like on a train, was not so useful. So this big train line through the city was slowly abandoned.
Usually when you use this word abandon, you're saying that you're going to leave something somewhere and you're not going to come back and get it. But here the idea is, if something is abandoned, it's no longer used, or it's being used less and less and less. For example, because of the typhoon, many people were forced to abandon their homes. They had to leave their homes, and they probably weren't going to go back, or they wouldn't be able to go back. Now, nature, it says, took its course, and while some sections of track were torn down, others gradually became home to a wide variety of plants and animals. It's starting to sound like the High Line is becoming a park.
Well, slowly, yes, absolutely. When nature takes its course, that means nature does what it naturally does. If you abandon a home, after a year or two, you'll find plants growing in the corners, and within 5 years, you might have birds living inside the house because there are no people there. This is kind of what happened with the High Line. Plants, bushes, flowers, birds move in, squirrels are turning it into their little home.
It became a park.
It became kind of a park. Nature took it over again, or came back. And so it says by 2009, so 40, 50, 60, 70 years after the High Line was slowly abandoned or just kind of left alone, by 2009, New Yorkers had realized the value of this unique area. What a cool place. It's like a park over our heads. And the High Line's new life as a public park began. I guess they could have torn it down and turned it back into a road there, but that costs a lot of money, and they don't need another road in New York City. But a new park, an interesting park, a park that has already begun thanks to Mother Nature. There's an interesting idea.
There you go. Let's turn it into a public park. Leave the High Line alone. All right, folks, with that, it's time for us to take a break, but don't go away. We'll be back after this.
刚刚说到，在1930年代，高架铁道出现了。那这条铁道它穿越了纽约市区，让货物可以运送到需要的地方。但是后来随着货车送货越来越普及，这个高架铁道就逐渐被废弃了。我们先来看3个单字 ：transport。它是当名词来表达运输、运送。那么在后面加上 ation 变成 transportation 就是表达运输、运输系统或是交通工具。 再来看 goods， 就是在 good 后面加上 s 变成这个名词，表示商品货物。当这个意思来解释时，必须用复数型。那么 abandon 是动词，它有放弃、离弃或是遗弃的意思。好，那么课文接着写到说，大自然就顺其自然的发展，尽管有部分的轨道被拆除，有些则逐渐成了各式各样动植物的家。好，这边来看4个文法重点。第一个 ，something take its course 是表达某事物顺其自然的发展下去。那常见的相关片语是 let nature take its course 来表达顺其自然。例如 I think you should just relax and let nature take its course. 我觉得你就应该放松，就让事情顺其自然的发展下去吧。好，第二个重点 tear down 它表示拆除、拆毁，像是拆除建筑物啊，或是某个结构体等等。那么 tear 的3态是 tear, tore, torn。例如They tore down the old house and built a new one. 他们拆掉那栋老房子，盖了一栋新的。第3个重点 be home to 加名词，或者是 become home to 加上名词，可以表达某地拥有什么，是什么什么的所在地、栖息地。这边的 home 是指所在地、栖息地的意思。好，例如Australia is home to some of the most dangerous animals in the world. 澳洲是某些世界上最危险动物的栖息地。第4个重点A variety of 表示各式各样的什么什么，之后呢可以接可数名词或是不可数名词。那么 variety 前面可以加上形容词，像 wide、large、great 等等来修饰它。举例来说，There are a large variety of vegetarian options on the menu. 菜单上面有各式各样的素食选择。好，接回到课文中。
A walk on the High Line, New York City's highest park. Currently, the High Line is almost a mile and a half long and features art exhibits, food and gift stands, performances, and dense gardens that are still growing. Visitors can take in its natural beauty while being surrounded by city sights and views of the Hudson River.
Okay, the High Line there in New York City. It's now a public park. We've got a section there. They didn't tear it down. And now it is home to plants and animals. It's quite the sight to see. Currently, the High Line is almost a mile and a half long and features art exhibits, food and gift stands, performances, and dense gardens that are still growing. Yeah, COVID-19 didn't stop those gardens from growing.
There you go. As you walk along the High Line, this park above the streets of New York, you'll see art exhibits, food and gift stands, performances, lots of good stuff. What is an exhibit? An exhibit is basically a show that is being put on for people to see. We're not talking about a performance like dancers or musicians. We're talking about art, probably. Paintings, sculptures, things like that, especially if it's there temporarily for just a short time at the local museum. They might have an exhibit of Picasso paintings there for a couple of months, and anyone who wants to see something cool and interesting will go to the exhibit. For example, the museum has dozens of new exhibits. Picasso paintings, for example.
Anyways, we also have this word dense to talk about. Let's say you have an amount of something. Okay, if you were to somehow compress that amount of something into a smaller space, you would say that you now have a denser material, okay? Let's say you have something that's light and fluffy, that's not dense. Something that is heavy and small at the same time, that would be very dense. So a material like a metal, like gold, let's say, would be very dense. Whereas, a pillow, let's say, that you rest your head on that's nice and soft, I wouldn't call that dense at all. For example, the treasure hunters cut their way through the dense jungle. There were leaves and vines everywhere. Oh, it's very hard to cut through. There were just, gosh, just plants everywhere. It was so dense in that jungle there. Anyways, visitors there, if you go to the High Line, can take in its natural beauty while being surrounded by city sights and views of the Hudson River.
One of the rivers that goes around the island of Manhattan. So there you go. The natural beauty of the High Line stretches in front of you, and off to one side you can maybe look out through the buildings, or right there you'll see the beautiful Hudson River in the middle of New York City, one of the biggest cities in the world. The High Line sounds like a great place to visit, and we're glad to get the chance to check it out with you guys. But that's it for today, so we'll see you all very, very soon. Until then, bye-bye.
好，高架铁道废弃之后呢，逐渐变成各种动植物的家。那么后来纽约人就意识到这个公园的独特性，就把它改造成城市公园。那这个高架铁道公园的长度差不多是1.5英里，不但有茂密的花园，还有艺术品展览、表演活动，甚至还有一些食物摊贩啊，还有礼品摊位等等。那么周围还有城市景色，还有哈德逊河的景色，你可以一边逛一边欣赏美景。我们最后来看2个单字 exhibit 它当动词可以表达展示、展出、陈列，不过在课文里面它是当名词来表达展示品、陈列品，或是有这种展览、展出的意思。下一个单字 dense 它是形容稠密的、密集的。Jeff 在解释单字时用到 compress 这个动词 compress compress 表示压缩、压紧的意思。好，那单字例句写到说，寻宝猎人在茂密的丛林中穿梭前进。老师就说，这个丛林可能到处都是藤蔓。那这时候用到 vine 这个字 vine vine 就是藤蔓。好，那么以上是今天的讲解，同学别走开，马上回来哦。
Aloha.Let me tell you a bit about hula. It's an important custom in Hawaii. It used to be a dance for social events. People performed it for enjoyment too. The songs or chants that go with hula tell stories of native island people's history. If I had to describe hula in one word, I would say that it's smooth. Both the body movements and the chants flow like water.Many people don't realize that hula is made up of only 6 traditional moves. Female hula dancers used to wear short skirts. Men wore clothes that covered only their middle. When Westerners arrived in Hawaii in the early 19th century, they wanted hula dancers to cover their bodies. So, both men and women hula dancers began wearing longer skirts.Hula is protected by the Hawaiian goddess Laka. People believe Laka causes the dancers' movements as they dance. Now, would you like to learn how to hula?
Here is more information.
Instrument. Jason can play many instruments. Island. The Okinawa Islands are in southwestern Japan.Volcano. Mount Fuji is the most famous volcano in Japan. Waist. Henry wears a black belt around his waist every day. Hip. Mrs. Smith fell and broke her hip last week. Ankle. Remember to stretch your ankles before running.Bracelet. Mandy's husband gave her a beautiful bracelet. Necklace. Hannah is wearing an expensive necklace. Chief. That strong man is the chief of this tribe. Dancer. All the dancers on the street are wearing traditional costumes. Wasn't that a super interesting lesson?I know I thought so. We'll see you again next time.
See you next time.